Hey everyone, welcome to Grab a Stack of Rock and 50 Years of Iron Maiden. We are finally at episode 9 and Powerslave with our very special guest from the YouTube channel Bicyclegs Talks Music. We have Bicyclegs himself. And before the show, he pointed out he doesn't usually wear a band shirt, but for our show, for Iron Maiden, he is wearing a band shirt. Welcome. And how
Yeah.
are you doing tonight or this morning?
This morning I'm doing pretty well. Yeah, as I was saying to you off air, it's a little bit cooler here today, so it makes it a lot more pleasant to record a show when it's not sort of boiling hot.
Well, imagine, if you will, a trip to the desert, to Egypt, in fact, to ancient Egypt. And we're talking about a really cool album here. I've been waiting a long time to get here. Harrison, I know you're excited too. This is a great, great Iron Maiden album. Before we get started doing the track by track, I will just run us through some album facts. So, Powerslave was recorded between February and June of 1984, and rather quick turnaround, was released on the 3rd of September 1984. This time, Martin Birch was named Pool Bully in the liner notes. He always has a different nickname. We're recording at Compass Point in Nassau, Bahamas. The album is 51 minutes and 12 seconds in length. It made it all the way up to number 26 in Australia, 21 in Canada, 21 in the United States, and number 2 in the United Kingdom, where it went gold, double platinum in Canada, and platinum in the US. Spawned 2 music videos, which are the first 2 tracks that we're going to be talking about. So, Bicyclegs, the opening track, Aces High.
Yeah.
Please share your thoughts.
Well, it's the beginning of a wild ride, isn't it? I mean, the thing about this album, and I'm maybe giving a little bit of a spoiler for the rest of it, there's really no let up on this album, is there? It's like, this is an album that just goes full throttle pretty much the whole way through. Like, you look at the previous album, Peace of Mind, you've got a song like Revelations, which is a little bit of a slower tempo, at least to begin with. You know, it gives you that little bit of breathing space. You don't get that here. And Aces High is, you know, it starts off with galloping riffs. It's got a powerful high-pitched vocal from Bruce. It's really good. It's one of Steve Harris's great historical lyrics. You know, this one's about sort of World War II fighter pilots and that sort of thing. It's a pretty concise song, you know, by a lot of Iron Maiden standards. You know, by this stage, they were starting to stretch out, and we'll definitely see that when we get into side 2 of this, you know, but they were starting to do 6-minute, 7-minute and longer songs. This is sort of a punchy 4.5 minutes. It's, you know, and I'm a sucker for the unison playing on this and a lot of the other songs on this album. You know, those twin guitars playing like either unison parts or playing harmonized parts, like melodic phrases. You know, the soloing's great too, but where it really is for me on this album and a lot of Iron Maiden is those twin guitars doing the unison or the harmony passages. So the only, you know, this isn't my favorite song on the album, not by any stretch. And that's saying a lot because I love this song. I think it's a great album opener.
That it is. I'm glad that you mentioned those harmony guitar parts and the unison parts, because we're going to be talking about those some more in this album.
Oh yeah.
I'll just very quickly show off my Super 7 reaction figure for Aces High Eddie. When we first saw this artwork, I mean, it speaks for itself. It's one of Derek Riggs' coolest pieces of art here for a single. And we were exposed to the music video first, and it had all that cool World War II dogfight footage. So we have a song about the Battle of Britain, as you said earlier. And I really was drawn to the tense, intricate guitars. You know, the part that I'm trying to, I'm not doing justice to. I think the production here is really, really sharp. And as you may have alluded to, I think perhaps this album represents Iron Maiden at peak guitar, maybe. I think it does represent Bruce in peak voice, and Aces High is a fantastic example of Bruce at peak voice. We have Nico and Steve ahead of the beat, driving the breakneck pace of this song. And you don't always hear Maiden songs where the vocals directly follow the underlying riff. So by that I mean, move into fire at the mainstream of
The
bomber.
style of singing,
Yeah. His voice is directly following the riff beneath it. We have really cool lyrics. They're an event-by-event recollection of one pilot's flight during the Battle of Britain. A fictional flight, obviously. It's a generic story, but it's a great example of Iron Maiden using lyrics for historical, I'm going to say, education. Because I think at one point in his career, Steve Harris must have realized that some kids were learning history through Iron Maiden lyrics. So I sincerely believe that, there's a little bit of, in the back of his mind, he knows that he's educating kids about these things like the Battle of Britain. Fantastic guitar solo with dive bombs and machine guns. It's all musical, though. A perfect Iron Maiden song, a perfect Iron Maiden single. Harrison, over to you.
I mean, amazing song. What hasn't been said about Aces High? I'm finding as we do this series that the problem with me being, only 25 years old and having waited 40 years to give my opinions on a lot of these songs is, what else can you say about them? But yeah, I mean, it's a song that has solidified its position as an opening track, probably better than any other track in the Maiden discography. I mean, the only time they've played it live, and it hasn't been the opening track, I believe, was on the Maiden England tour where they did it as the first encore. But other than that, it's been the opener only. And the only criticism I could possibly ever give to this song, and it's such a minor one, is when they do play it live, the opening guitar bit before it starts going off really fast is played from tape. So sometimes the guitar sound they have on that tour doesn't match, and you sort of hear that mismatch as it gets going. But like I said, very minor criticism that doesn't even apply to this album version.
I know we're going to talk about this when we get to Live After Death in the next episode, but we should also briefly mention the Churchill speech, which is how they had the music video. So when I first heard the song, we will go on to the end, and that was very dramatic and very cool. And also, I should also mention, because we want to keep track, this is a Steve Harris solo write, but the next song is a Smith Dickinson write for a team. They became a team that lasted through the decades. And this is a second single called 2 Minutes to Midnight. So bicycleleggs, consider 2 minutes to midnight, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, it's another really sort of high octane song. I love, though, there's a section in this song which I assume the technical term for it is the pre-chorus. It's that little section just between the verse and the chorus. They go down to half speed like the drums do. So I always loved that. When I was doing my Bicyclegs Discovers Rush series on my channel, that was a common thing that I was talking about with a lot of Rush songs. They would do this trick where they would switch from sort of like full speed to half speed and then quicken it back up again. And it's a little touch in this sort of hard rock or heavy metal music that I really, really love. It's another cinematic track. That's the thing I would say about a lot of these songs too, and especially Aces High, as well as 2 Minutes to Midnight, is they're almost like little, 4, 5, 6 minute movies, musically and lyrically. You could just about write a whole script for a film from these songs, which I think is really, really cool. Some slightly grotesque imagery in this song, though. It absolutely works, and I love that about it. And it connected with me because, this is a song about sort of the Reagan years and the Cold War and that sort of thing. And I lived through that as a teenager. And, it was a pretty scary time to be alive. We were definitely sort of thinking about the possibility of global thermonuclear war and things like that. And it was the sort of thing that would keep this album came out in 1984, wasn't it? So I was 13 years old at the time. So, a young kid, the idea of like a global nuclear war would keep you awake at night. I love the soloing in the instrumental section. It's really, really good. And then the second half of that instrumental section, it gets kind of somber for a bit, which again, you know, really suits the subject matter. I love that little sort of somber part in the second half of the instrumental middle section. And then it picks pace up again at the end. Love it, love it, love it. It's a great song. It's about, what, 6 minutes long? I think I don't know that it could have been any shorter. It's a really, really good song, and surprisingly concise considering it's 6 minutes long.
So following up on two of your points, the cinematic thing, again, the music video, it looked like it was from a movie, but it's not. Like, that's original footage, and it's so like James Bond, and it's so like you know, high stakes spy stuff. So there's another aspect of the cinematic. And regarding the lyrics, we were driving around. My wife Jen and I have been listening to Iron Maiden in the car throughout the entire series. And yesterday, 2 Minutes to Midnight was playing, and she was like, wow, like she was kind of taken aback at the graphicness of the lyrics. But as you say, it works. We're talking about, you know, the proliferation of nuclear weapons. We're talking about that whole era in the 80s that you alluded to, where we had it shoved down our throats in every kind of media, from Terminator movies to, you know, so many. There was Threads, there was the next day or the day after or whatever it was called. It was everywhere. So why not? It was a popular song with Ozzy too, or popular topic for Ozzy to sing in songs as well. Nuclear proliferation and nuclear war. My notes here are rather brief. The doomsday clock is being the part of the subject matter here. Look it up if you don't know what the doomsday clock is. It's remarkable that a song with this kind of lyrical imagery and length could be released unedited as a single, but there you have it. It was. The riff, classic Adrian riff, very similar to what he would do with the Wicker Man later on. Nico's drum fills here are each unique. They're all musical in nature, just as Archie Gamble told us about in our drummer episode. The exact meaning of the lyrics, I have a hard time discerning them. There's obviously a lot of symbolism going on anytime Bruce writes lyrics. But the message is anti-weapons of mass destruction and useless loss of life. But there's an anthemic chorus and some really miraculous slow guitar work in that middle section that you mentioned. And that's all I had to say about 2 Minutes to Midnight. Over to Harrison.
All right, I'm going to get a little unfair here because I'm really tired of 2 Minutes to Midnight because it's appeared on so many live albums. And I find that the live album versions of it tend to be a little underpowered because there's only one Bruce singing there on the chorus. And yeah, truthfully, the only versions of 2 Minutes to Midnight that I regularly listen to are the Blaze Bayley versions, if you can believe that. But funny little tidbit about the video that they did for this one. They were scouting locations, the label, and they got like pictures of all these possible locations for the Mercenaries' Den. And they came back with the band, oh, we found this one great place. It's awful. It's horrible. It's the shittest place you've ever seen. And they put a Polaroid of it on the table. And Bruce picks it up and says, oh, yeah, Ruffy House. I used to live there.
Oh, was that like the house for bad kids or whatever that they sent him to? Or...
No, I think it was like his first flat outside of living out of home. I think. Don't quote me on it, but yeah,
okay, gotcha.
He used to live at that at one of the locations that they scouted for it. I don't know if it ended up going on to appear in the music video or not, but as he put it in his book, "Small World Indeed."
Fascinating. Anything else to add about 2 Minutes to Midnight?
No, I'm quite finished there.
Okay, so that moves us on to an instrumental, and the first album instrumental since Killers, Lost for Words, written by Steve Harris, Bicyclegs.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's an instrumental, and I love it when bands that have really good chops, that are really great players, do instrumentals. Again, going back to my Bicyclegs Discovers Rush series, I always loved it when Rush did an instrumental because it was just a chance for them to kind of let loose. And, you know, the funny thing, though, with this one is it's not a big showboating instrumental. It's very much a composed piece. And I believe this may have even been the case, but it sounds like the sort of thing that they were going to put a lyric to and just never either got around to it or never could agree on what lyric should go with it. but it's a fast, heavy shuffle. You know, it's got that shuffle beat, the dun 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 dun, which, you know, gives it great momentum. The twin guitars on this particular piece send shivers down my spine. They're so good. You know, and one of the things, you know, it's that I noticed with this song, but you get it throughout this album and indeed throughout the Maiden catalog, is I love the fact of how prominent Steve Harris's bass is in these tracks. You know, you don't hear that. You listen to a lot of metal from around, you know, sort of late 70s, early 80s, that sort of thing. The bass often gets buried in the mix. It's not buried here. It's right up front and prominent. And I love that about this music. I mean, it may have a lot to do with the fact that, you know, Steve Harris more or less ran this band, you know, so you know, he would have had a big say in where the bass was in the mix and that sort of thing. But I love it. It gives them a distinctiveness, which I really, really enjoy. You know, as I said, there's not much soloing on this song, but I'm fine with that. I like the fact that it's kind of a through composed song rather than just a jam and an excuse to play a lot of solos and that sort of thing. Yeah, but it's a really good instrumental, and I wish they'd done more of them, because I think they don't do another one until sort of, you know, sometime in the 21st century, do they?
Well, as far as I'm aware, Lost for Words was the final instrumental, although it's certainly a lot of their more recent songs have had very long instrumental passages in them.
They did some B-side instrumentals, such as like More T
Past
Vicar.
the Jam, I think.
Past the Jam and More T Vicar around the time of Dance of Death. But we'll get there.
I forgot about that.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, well, we'll get there. I don't have a lot to say. I know Martin Popoff kind of considers album instrumentals by Iron Maiden to not really be full songs, but that's obviously a subject for debate. Martin
Popoff gave Virtual 11 a 0. Can we really trust what he says?
Well, you know, we're not going to go disparaging Martin. We want to get him on the show again. But
true.
I don't always necessarily agree with Bicyclegs on every song, and I just found this one not to be the most interesting instrumental that they've ever done, and I kind of felt like the album dropped in quality after 2 singles in a row. But I will praise it for its intricacy, its speed. There's lots of variation through the different sections, lots of that great unison stuff with the guitars. But at the end of the day, I'm just being honest, guys. I call it a B-side quality instrumental, and I'm sorry. Over to Harrison.
I mean, I love it. I mean, as I've mentioned before, I love when Maiden do instrumentals because, as Bicyclegs pointed out, they are that incredibly technically proficient band, and they don't do the instrumentals very often, despite the long instrumental passages you'll find in a lot of their songs. But this is definitely the most technical of the instrumentals and sounds the most like a fully formed song compared to, say, Genghis Khan or Transylvania, because it's almost got verses and chorus sections, obviously without lyrics to go with them. But my favorite part of the song probably has to be right after the solo finishes and starts transitioning back into the verses, if you will. It's that that one of the guitars is doing.
Well, we don't have to agree. But I'm glad you guys liked it, because we need to get some different. We can't all be just praising the album, you know, right?
Yeah, I will admit it's probably a teeny bit too long. At just over 5 minutes, they probably could have cut about 30 seconds here or there. But other than that, I mean, I like what I hear.
Yeah, and you know, I'm going to disagree with you again, because I don't really feel that time going by. But it's all about perception too. You know, to me, I hear it as more 3.5 minutes in my head. But
there was one time, like right before the guitar soloing started, and it changed it all up, where it went back to that verse, and I remember looking at the runtime, being like, But other than that, I mean, yeah.
All right, so Lost for Words. The interesting thing about that song is it kind of divides side 1 of the record into 2 segments. We have the 2 singles, then we have this instrumental, and we have a couple of, I don't know if you want to call them deep cuts, but we have a couple songs about sword fighting. The first of which is a Bruce Dickinson solo right called Flash of the Blade. Your thoughts on that one, Bicyclegs?
Yeah, well, this one, I believe it's specifically about sort of fencing. because I believe Bruce was into fencing. It was like one of his hobbies. And yeah, so that's what I understand the song is about, specifically is the, the art of fencing. Like I always used to like watching the fencing on the Olympics and that sort of thing, because there's an elegance to it, and I think he's kind of tapping into that with this. Everything's so fast tempoed though. When they were playing this, like the next album is obviously Live After Death, which is one of my favorite live albums of all time. I always think to myself, and I've never had the opportunity, unfortunately, to see them live, but they must be fit guys to be able to play this music for 2-3 hours, however long a Maiden show is, and be able to keep up that pace, the whole time. I'm guessing these guys work out or something like that, because it would be exhausting.
Well, Bruce's fencing conditions him for it as well, because fencing's a pretty exhausting sport. By the end of it, you're drenched in sweat.
Yeah, I mean, like Aces High, this is a pretty concise song. It's only 4 minutes and change. Again, the twin guitars in the middle section are incredible. And this will be a something we'll get into a lot more on side 2, but I swear this band is proggy, and like I'm a prog guy, so like I love my metal too, don't get me wrong, but I was a prog guy in sort of mid 80s and that sort of thing, and that's what really pulled me in, because my first exposure to Iron Maiden when I was a teenager, it wasn't my own record collecting, it was actually my younger sister, because she was the real metalhead in the family. And but I would listen to her records when she would play them and that sort of thing. And the Maiden ones were the ones that I was always egging her on to play more of. So I love that their lyrics are about interesting topics. We've had a song about World War II. We've had a song about the Cold War. We've got a song here about fencing and, the topics that we'll get in on side 2. They're not singing about, going to the bar and getting trashed, or, picking up girls, or, all that sort of thing. Their lyrics are meaty and interesting. And as I said earlier, cinematic. And I love that about Maiden, and this album in particular. I would argue that this is arguably their most cinematic album, certainly of the 80s stuff. So, yeah, this is a great track. I really, really like it.
That's a strong statement considering some of the albums that are still to come. But I agree with you. Like when I hear Flash of the Blade, I hear a potential movie condensed into one song. There's a story going on here. We have the fencing, but it's not just the fencing, but there is a story here, and it's about this young man, I assume, whose house, his family has been destroyed, and he embarks on this new life of death and revenge. It's very graphic in steely iron mask. Bruce is a poet when it comes to writing rock lyrics, in my opinion. I really like the cool hammer-on guitar lick, that nana. And I can kind of hear how Bruce might have written this song by farting around on a guitar, because, when I was a kid farting around on a guitar, we did a lot of that stuff. We weren't doing it very musically, but we were doing it. I think that this song is, you said progressive. What I wrote down was very advanced heavy metal. And once again, incredible drum fills by Nico McBrain. So those are my thoughts on Flash of the Blade. Over to you, Harrison.
I'm going to talk about Flash of the Blade and the Duelist in one, because my thoughts are identical and you can just skip me next round. So I think they're both all right songs. They've got good bits that I like, particularly with Flash of the Blade, with that recurring guitar motif that you mouthed out earlier. But I never listen to them outside the album. I'm never like, oh, gee, I really want to listen to the Duelist. Let's go to YouTube or my MP3s or anything like that. And the same goes with, Duelists, Flash of the Blade, both of them. They're just, there's only like 4 Iron Maiden songs I dislike, and these aren't one of them, or these aren't 2 of them, but they're not songs that I'm overly keen on. And I don't listen to Powerslave as much because Live After Death has, it's in addition to being Live After Death, it's also got the highlights of Powerslave.
Okay, so on that note, we're going to go straight to the Duelists. And this one is a Harris written song, also about fighting with a blade. Over to you, bicyclegs.
Well, I mean, it's about fighting. It could be a blade. It could be something else. There's a line in it about choose your weapon. So, I'm thinking, it could be a blade, but it could be a pistol as well, So it follows on logically from Flash of the Blade, though, I think, absolutely. Bruce really soars on this one, though. That's the thing that maybe I pick out this song and maybe Harrison, I would suggest go and have a listen to Bruce's vocal on this one and just listen to how he soars on this one. I mean, maybe it's not the strongest song on the album. I would agree with that. But I think Bruce's performance makes it worth hearing because it's one of his finest vocals.
I'm just looking at the lyrics now because we were talking about them. It can go either way because there's a line about the choosing of guns or fighting with swords, but then later on it talks about a cut to the chest and you're down, a cut, a parry, a thrust, a feint, sort of thing. So the jury's out on what weapon is.
Well, it sounds like
presumably they chose the sword.
Yeah, exactly. They had the choice of pistols or swords, and they went with swords. But and
the chorus talks about fight for the honor, the splendor, and traditionally swords are a more honorable fighting weapon than a bang, a gun.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. One of the things I would point out about all the songs on side one, Iron Maiden often get criticized for being, bloated and having songs that are too long and all that sort of thing. I think these songs, all the songs on side one, are really tight, well-constructed songs. Every part of it is there for a reason and it works within the whole. The other thing I love about this album, and, it was an Iron Maiden thing more generally, every song on this album comes to a full stop. None of them fade out. And I love that about it.
5 in their career that fade out in total.
As far as I know, they don't have a single fade out until Stranger in a Strange Land on the next album.
Maybe, I think Women in Uniform fades out, but it's debatable whether that counts as a true Iron Maiden song for the purposes of this discussion.
I mean, Women in Uniform's a cover, and it was only included on the Australian version of Killers anyway. So, yeah. But, yeah, I don't know if the people outside the Iron Maiden fan base give these guys credits for being really good songwriters, and being able to construct a tightly well-constructed song. You've got another great instrumental middle section here. These guys are virtuosos. I like this one better than Flash of the Blade, but I can understand why Harrison maybe doesn't go back to these songs as much. But I think in the context of the album, they work really well.
I love this song. I did take it as the sword interpretation, although I love the idea of dueling pistols. That takes me back to like a Stanley Kubrick movie like Barry Lyndon, where there's a couple great scenes with dueling pistols. I also love, you mentioned the middle instrumental section. I really love that guitar part because to me it musically illustrates the movements of the two men with the swords as they kind of dance around each other. I love that, and I think Iron Maiden do that frequently in their music, whether intentional or not. That's how I am hearing it. I love the Duelist. I would have picked this as a third single if there was a third single. This is my pick.
You even drew a single out for it, if I recall.
I did
correctly.
draw single art and put it on my wall. I did. I love that chugging guitar riff. That there's a lot of great stuff in here that I love as far as guitar goes. But what could have made it single worthy is the chorus that with a whoa. And Bruce singing that chorus, oh my goodness, you're talking about how Bruce poured everything into this song. Like that chorus really, really pushes his voice to the limits. And what a way to end the side. Fought to the death. And then everybody just kind of plays it out. And then we flip the record over. We go to side 2 with an incendiary opening track called Back in the Village, which was written by Smith and Dickinson one more time. So, bicyclegs, take us back to the village.
Well, there's no letting up going into side 2, is there? I mean, it's just full throttle right there again. You know, there's galloping riffs, you know, that ferocious playing and singing on this song. Absolutely brilliant. I will admit, though, I am a bit of a dum-dum because I did not realize for the longest time that this song is a sequel song. So I always used to kind of struggle as to what it was about. And then I realized that it's sort of going on from The Prisoner and that sort of thing, you know, because he talks about the, you know, I don't have a number, I'm a name. And I remembered that from that show, you know, he was referred to as number 6 or whatever it was, the character in that show. And so it took me ages. And then I was doing some reading, preparing for this show. And I read that and I was like, of course it is. What's going on with me? Why didn't I ever pick that up? Because the lyric is evocative. It's really evocative. But I had I just didn't really quite gather what the actual plot of the song. And again, you know, we're talking about cinematic and sort of things. This song has a plot. You know, a lot of songs don't have plots. They have lines, you know. This has a plot, and there's some terrific soloing on this song too. I feel like I'm doing a workout listening to this song. You know, I talk about how fit they have to be on stage. I feel like they're getting me fit just listening to this song because I can feel the blood pumping, you know. I feel like I'm going jogging or something like that. Like, honestly, I was listening to this again last night and I could feel my heart rate going up listening to this song because you just get enveloped in it. So yeah, I mean, it's a really great opener for side 2. As I say, no let up. So
no let up whatsoever. It opens right with that Adrian Smith guitar riff. And, you know, Maiden today, we've got 3 guitar players. We've got Adrian, we've got Dave, and we've got Yannick. And you can really tend to tell when the guitar parts are written by a particular guy. And this one is a quintessential Adrian guitar riff. As in the vernacular of the kids today, I was today years old when I learned that this song was a sequel to The Prisoner, and it all makes sense now. I don't have a number, I'm a name, and the village was the name of the location in The Prisoner, so that makes sense. Thank you for informing me. What else did I have to say about this song? I pointed out that the language is often symbolic with a Bruce song. A good line here: questions are a burden and answers are a prison for oneself.
That's taken from The Prisoner itself. And when I went back and I watched The Prisoner, I saw that on like a placard on the wall. And I was just like, you know, that humorous internet image of Leonardo DiCaprio pointing. He's like, ooh. I was just like, oh my, that's it. That's the line from the song. You know, because I knew that it was about the prisoner, but I didn't realize how close the ties were to it. And that line, questions are a burden and answers a prison for oneself, is from the show itself.
So we'll just do that again. And over to you, Harrison, for Back in the Village.
I mean, I love Back in the Village. It's one of my favorite Iron Maiden deep cuts of all time. I always love an up-tempo song. And my favorite part has to be the chorus build-up, where it builds in intensity. But every time you have it, it's a little more intense. And at the very end, Bruce just ends it by just basically shrieking. It reaches that sort of crescendo point before the final chorus. And I mean, I was going to bring up that line, but you beat me to it. Yeah, that's one of my favorite lines in the whole song. And yeah, what a song.
So then we come to a spooky bit. This is something that my friend Bob Shipper and I used to loop over and over and over again on Halloween to make spooky sound effects tape. You can hear a heartbeat.
Which, if you have the 1998 remaster, this is actually
right. It's stuck to the end of Back in the Village. It shouldn't be. It should be. On this version, it's its own intro to Powerslave, but we hear the heartbeat, the boom, boom, pish, pish, boom, boom, and then a shriek, a scream. a blood-curdling scream, and into this riff, bum, ba-da-dun, da-da-dun, da-da-dun, and another Bruce Dickinson solo right. Bicyclegs. What do you think about the epic title track, Powerslave?
Well, I'm going to start off by saying, to me, this album, Powerslave, is one of those it's one of those albums. I think Martin Popov did a show on Sea of Tranquility. I could be getting this wrong, but where they talked about albums where side 2 is better than side 1. To me, this is one of those albums. To me, side 2 is where it's really at for me. And the last 2 tracks in particular are my favorite 2 tracks on the album. I love the fact with this one is how the band evoke that Egyptian sound and that Egyptian feel without getting cliched. They don't go into the sort of but they do enough of these sort of, minor melodies in the riffs and that sort of thing to give you that evocation of ancient Egypt and that sort of thing. And I love, love, love that about this song. I love the lyric, the idea that you've got the God King coming to grips with the fact that he is in fact mortal, or fact maybe not coming to grips with it. He's trying to come to grips with it.
He's in denial. He's in denial.
Yeah.
Denial is the river of Egypt.
It is indeed. It's a wonderful lyric. It's a wonderful, again, great story. I'd love to see someone make a movie of this. The middle instrumental section, you get your first small, short breather in pretty much the whole album. And, the other thing is, I wanted to make a bit of a comparison here, Mike. You and I have done a few shows now, one on your channel, couple on mine, about the band Marillion. And I feel like there are little comparisons between these 2 bands. They're very different sounding. I mean, obviously, Marillion's a neo-progressive band. Iron Maiden are a metal band. But they were both on EMI around about the same time. They both had a very distinctive visual style. I'm talking about the Fish era Marillion here in particular. They used to deal in dark, gritty topics and that sort of thing. And this instrumental section sounds a little Marillion-y to me. I could almost imagine Steve Rothery playing some of that guitar. And it's great. It gets quieter for a little bit. It creates that sort of atmosphere, and then it goes back into overdrive. And I love that about it. There's some blistering solos and some great twin guitars. The last thing I wrote in my notes was simply the word bliss. I love this song.
Yeah, as do I. This is my favorite song on the album. I really want to highlight certain sections of it, but we're going to talk about the lyrics in a little bit. Harrison's going to walk us through a story about these lyrics. But Bruce wrote both the music and the lyrics. It has a great chug, as you mentioned. It sort of alludes to that Middle Eastern sound without going corny, without going cliche. But it's in that I think the most important thing about this song for me, though, is that instrumental section where it goes soft for a little bit, and Harris is kind of playing a complimentary melody on his bass, and somebody's playing a really cool, slower, more emotional, more Rothery kind of guitar solo, but then it picks up. And I sort of pre-recorded myself humming this riff because I wanted to get it right, but this riff comes in. That riff comes in, and then Adrian starts wailing some solos, and the solos are so well written. They're all written, Yannick tends to go off the cuff. Adrian writes his solos, and you can hum them. There's that part that goes like and it's a lot of really cool technique that he's throwing in. And then we get back to the chug after a really cool Nico descending drum roll. We get back to the chug. And Bruce finishes the story. The Pharaoh is cold and a ghost lives in his veins. But open the gates of his hell and he strikes from the grave. Or will he? Or will he? I mean, there's those wonderful stories of those Egyptian curses. But of course, you know, there's really nothing to all that. It's a wonderful story. It's great storytelling. Egypt is a great place to go for those kinds of stories. A lot of the stuff that he's talking about in the lyrics is taken directly and accurately from mythology. You know, enter the risen Osiris, risen again. Do your reading. You'll see what that's about. It's a masterpiece of a song. And I think I've said everything I can about Powerslave. I've said that it's my favorite on this album. That's what it is. Over to you, Harrison.
I mean, what a song. A song that Bruce Dickinson basically mushed 3 different song ideas together, but despite that, it sounds entirely cohesive. You know, amazing song in every aspect. I love the chorus build up where it starts to build a bit in intensity, you know, dun, 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 and so on, before hitting this epic chorus with the ahs in the background. Bruce is singing in the lower register here, which is something he doesn't always do, especially not on the rest of this album, but I think it works. I mean, I hate to keep bringing up Blaze Bayley ahead of time, but I think this is a song that he would have nailed. I would have loved to have heard him sing this because this sort of lower register was perfect for him. But, you know, back to 1984, that soloing midsection is as good as it gets, basically.
Yep. And with nothing else to be said, we are at the end of the album, 7 tracks, and bicyclegs has to somehow take us into the Steve Harris written epic, The Rime. Or actually, well, let's introduce it as Bruce would do. Bicyclegs, this is a song about what not to do if a bird shits on you. The Rime of the Ancient Mariner.
Yeah, beware the albatross.
Now, like Bruce, when he introduces it in front, it's like he's like, yeah, mad, and then the song starts. Anyway, I'll get back to you.
Look, tell me this isn't prog. Tell me this isn't prog. We have a nearly 14-minute song in multiple sections based on a 19th century epic poem. I mean, does it get more prog than that? Seriously. You know, it's slightly slower than the other songs, but it's still well up tempo. I admire how Bruce, you know, not just on this song, but on a few of the other songs too, he gets out these real tongue twister lyrics. You know, there's a lot of words crammed into, you know, did a rhyme of the ancient mariner, da, 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 da. You know, I can't sing this song because I trip over my tongue trying to do it. But yeah, I mean the ensemble playing in this, you know, the unison playing in that water everywhere section, it's just beautiful, isn't it? You get a tempo shift into like the death and life in death section. It changes time signature, just for the nerdy of us out there. You go from a straight 4/4 into more of a 12/8 kind of feel. So it gives that kind of shuffly thing that da 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 da, you know, which I really, really like. I mean, you could just say it's in 4/4 but in triplets, but you know, you could also say it's in 12/8. Then we get this incredible, slow, creepy section, complete with sort of creaking floorboard sound effects. You know, it's just, when I listened to this last night for the last time, I decided to listen to it on earbuds rather than on my open speakers. And you can just hear all the little details and stuff. Yeah, I mean, you know, Martin Birch did an incredible job producing this album. He really, really did. And it's the first place, you know, for an extended period of time where the listener can really catch their breath, you know, because you've got this slow, creepy, ominous kind of section. You know, it's the first sort of period for more than 30 seconds where you can really, relax for a bit. Although, you know, I don't know if relaxing in that sort of ominous vibe is necessarily a good thing to do. You know, Steve Harris, I think he shows off his chops in this section too, which I think is great. And then you get another different musical section as the vocals return. And I really, really like that. Around the 11-minute mark, you even get some bits, these couple of bars with odd time signatures, you know, where they like drop or add an extra beat or drop a beat. I didn't actually sit and count it, so I don't know whether it's like it's in 7 or if it's in 9 or whatever, but it definitely, there's an odd time signature thing going on in that bit. And then you finally get back to that sort of opening verse section musically, you know, rhyme of the, you know, it's not the rhyme of the ancient, but it's that melody again, you know.
The mariner's bound to tell of a story, tell his tale wherever he goes.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is my favorite track on the album, which may not surprise anybody who's watched my channel. I'm a prog guy. And this song is 100% prog. Scott Lade from the Prog Corner recently did a video on, like, he picked his 10 tyrants of prog. And one of the people he picked was Steve Harris. And he just said, Iron Maiden's prog. I'm calling it. So, you know, if Scott Lade from the Prog Corner says it's prog, then by golly, it's prog. So, yeah, it's just an incredible way to close out the album, though. And, you know, nearly 14 minutes long, this song doesn't outstay its welcome. I don't think there's a second wasted here on this song. I love it to death.
You know, it's funny, the middle section that you say, the relaxing section, you know, the narration is actually going, with heavy thump, they drop down one by one. So no, I'm not relaxed at all. I used to think that was violins for the longest time. That it turns out it's a guitar with doing a volume swell, and I didn't know. I always thought that was a violin. I don't really have much to add, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tell an anecdote instead. Growing up, my good buddy Bob Shipper, we listened to this album start to finish. We had every lyric in this song memorized, but we would walk home from school and we would burst into song. The curse, it lives on in their eyes. We would sing that whole section all the way through to, and then down in falls comes the rain, you know, and we would do our best. We would hit that note to the best of our childhood abilities, which my 52-year-old throat can't do anymore, but my God, we tried. And, you know, we loved Iron Maiden. So in the 9th grade, I had the opportunity to do a report or a study on poetry, and I chose Iron Maiden's Rime of the Ancient Mariner, which is basically the Cole's Notes version of the original epic poem. And boy, did we get in crap. My partner Dinesh and myself did this lyrical analysis of the lyric to the song Rime of the Ancient Mariner. And, you know, the teacher said, okay, now what about the original book? And then Dinesh turns to me and he goes, there's a book? Oh, anyway, thankfully he didn't hate me forever and we remained friends. But that's all I have to say about the Rime of the Ancient Mariner. Over to you, Harrison.
I mean, yeah, I love the song. The soloing section, you know, just as good as Powerslaves. I love how there's so many different vocal melodies and occasional time signature change ups. Some of them that only get used for like a couple lines or a verse and that you never hear again in the song. But it's all part of what makes this 13-minute song not drag anywhere, because it's constantly sounding fresh. And I mean, yeah, that's, you know, it's easy to understand why they played this on the Somewhere in Time tour instead of Alexander the Great, because it is a hell of a song.
And you know what? Can I just mention again, there's so many great riffs on this album. Some of them written by Adrian, some written by Bruce, and some written by Steve, but there's a lot of great ones in this song. And just that opening, it's so good. Just that riff alone. You know, if this was a 4-minute song, it would have been great. But they just, as Harrison said, Powerslave, you know, a bunch of 3 songs stuck together. But man, they picked some great parts to stick together to make these songs. So that's the album. We're going to quickly discuss some B-sides here, and I'll start with the B-sides myself. First up, we have Rainbow's Gold. These are available on this 2-disc edition of Powerslave. This is a cover by Beckett, Terry Slessor, and Kenny Mountain wrote this song. I don't mind it. I really like the opening riff and the melody. In the heat of the morning. Really like that. And I apologize for singing, but it's the best way to illustrate which parts I'm talking about. Song picks up in speed. That melody returns. I don't think the rest of the song is necessarily up to the quality of that one melody, that one hook. Then we have King of Twilight by Nectar. And this brings me back to childhood because there was a WWF wrestler named Kamala, the Ugandan headhunter. And that kind of tribal sounding really sounds like Kamala's old wrestling entrance theme. But Nico's doing some great stuff on the drums there with King of Twilight. Lastly, there's a live version of Number of the Beast among these B-sides. And the only thing I have to add about that is that one of my friends had it and taped it for me. And I was always disappointed that Bruce sang 6 and let the audience sing 6-6. As a young kid who's never been to a concert in his life, I always felt like a little bit of a ripoff. Bruce singing just 6, and you would provide your own 6-6 to complete the song. That's all I have to say about these B-sides. Bicyclegs, I know you did a little bit of listening to them. Do you have anything you want to say?
Well, the first thing I wanted to say is I didn't know these B-sides because I've only ever owned this album on vinyl. This is an original UK pressing. I believe you just got a very nifty new one, Mike.
Yes, I just got the zoetrope, which you can see here. This one has a gatefold instead of just being a single sleeve, and the record itself is very nice. There is the A side and then the B side, and the idea is you spin it and it's supposed to give you an animation that you can look at, although we haven't quite gotten anything that we can discern with my human eyes. We're still working on getting the effect correctly.
I've got a zoetrope disc, not that one, but I think you have to like shine a light on it at a certain angle and you'll get that. Like I did that once. I got like a torch and just shone it on the record as it was spinning. And if you get it just right, the angle, then you'll get that kind of animation thing going on. But going back to these B-sides, yeah, I'm new to these. I only listened to these in preparing for this show. And I didn't realize at first that they're both cover versions. So Rainbow's Gold definitely has like a more traditional metal sound to me. It sounds like something that like Judas Priest would have been doing in the late 70s or early 80s, you know, especially in the sort of first 2/3 of the song. And then the last third, it kind of gets that more Iron Maiden-y gallop to it. You know, they kind of change tempo and it gets more of that thing. But I like the song quite a bit. So much so, in fact, that after I've done these shows and that sort of thing, I've got another show I'm preparing for that I'm recording tomorrow. I'm going to go on to streaming and listen to the one and only Beckett album and see what it's like, because, yeah, it rather appealed to me, this song. And then King of Twilight, you know, the first thing I thought is, wow, this is unusually mellow. And then I, again, realized it was a cover of a Nectar song, you know. Again, Iron Maiden covering a progressive rock song, you know. So the connection is definitely there, boys and girls. You know, it still has some nice crunch to it in, you know, and the middle section gets more intense. And there's a Queen-like influence in this song. There's this bit that sounds very Queen to me. But yeah, I quite like these. You know, obviously, you know, they're cover versions. You wouldn't put them on the album and that sort of thing. But as B-sides, I think they're rather good.
Cool. All right, Harrison, over to you about the B-sides, and you're also going to discuss the elephant in the room, the other B-side.
Fourth one. Yes, right, Rainbow's Gold. Yuck. Yuck. That intro reminds me of Aerosmith's Sweet Emotion, which is also a song I don't like. King of Twilight doesn't really do it for me either, but not with such. There's a word I'm trying to think of that starts with V. Visceral, not with such visceral disgust. King of Twilight is just a song that I don't really care for. Number of the Beast Live. All right, so this is from Dortmund, 1983. This is one of 2 songs from that show that is available in audio format across their discography. Now, interesting about the song, you don't get the full narration that begins the let the him who hath understanding. It sort of like fades in on the final line or 2 of that. This is the end of the Peace of Mind tour. Bruce's voice is pretty close to what we get on Live After Death, especially compared to the start of the Peace of Mind tour, where it was a lot stronger. But the instruments don't have that massive arena sound that you'd get on that famous Live After Death live album. All right, so the final B-side is credited, I believe, to McBrain, Harris, and Dickinson. Can you just double check that for me?
Track 2, Mission for Mary, written by Steve Harris and Nico McBrain.
All right, yeah. So Bruce obviously didn't contribute enough to get a co-write, but
no,
right,
he
so
recorded it though. He should get a production credit
a few times in it. But no, so this is a recording of an argument that Nico and Steve had backstage after a show, and they put it out as a B-side. And about 10 years ago, I think, Nico McBrain explained the context behind this argument, what happened after, what happened before. It's this really hilarious video. Nico's an amazing storyteller. Just Google Nico explains Mission from Ari to get the full experience, but I'm going to give sort of an abridged version. So, 1983, Allentown, Pennsylvania, the World Peace Show. To Tame a Land ends, and Nico's beginning his drum solo. Off he goes, but there's a problem elsewhere on the stage. Steve Harris's wireless bass battery has died. So he grabs Paul, nearest lighting rigger, and says, you got to tell Nico to keep drumming longer. My bass battery broken. So Paul runs off to find Nico. Now, Nico's on a 10x10 drum riser. He's, seated a bit forward. He's surrounded by drums, throttling away. There he is on his drum solo. So Paul needs to get his attention. So Paul, he gets a drumstick and he pokes Nico in the back. Nico's like... and then Paul yells out to Nico, but obviously this is Nico's throttling away. He can't hear properly. So all Nico hears is something along the lines of like, oh, blah, 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 blah. And Nico's just like, what? And then, obviously he's like, piss off, and keeps drumming. So a little bit later, another stick in the back. This time, as Nico describes it, more with zest. And, this time he's like, blah, 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 Ari. And then Nico's just like, he said, Ari, that means my boss. Of course, Nico's mind isn't on his drum solo now. He's on, what does Steve Harris possibly want? So, as Nico puts it in the video, I told him in no unequivocal terms, piss off. Sure enough, stick number 3 in the back comes, and Nico's just like, you! Right, so Nico gets up. He throws his drumsticks on the floor, Tom. They hit the tom. They bounce up in the air. It looks like he planned it. And then he launches into a tirade of profanity as he gives this guy a right bollocking. The overhead mics pick this all up and broadcast it to the audience. They love it. There's a rapturous applause for Nico McBrain. After he's finished bollocking this guy, he sits back down, picks up some drumsticks, and recontinues his solo because he hadn't actually finished. So later after the show, they get into the dressing room, and Nico's just like, that bloody geezer Paul, he made me mess up. What's the matter with that? Steve's just like, I sent him. You need to go and apologize. He goes, like, what? You sent him? No, you can take a short jump off and off here. I'm not apologizing. So Nico's point was, you don't do that to an artist when they're performing. He made me mess up. If you want to get a message to the drummer, you go to the drum tech, and the drum tech whispers in your ear, extend the solo. Steve Harris's point is just like, I told him to get a message to you, not to Bill, the drum tech. So obviously he did the best he could. He was in a rush. He needed to get a message to you. And, Steve's like, you need to apologize. You were out of order to give him a bollocking. And Nico's just like, I don't care if he's on a mission from you. You don't do that to an artist. And so they argue for about 20 minutes, and it just starts winding down. Bruce comes in with a tape recorder in his pocket. He's standing there. Nico's impression of Bruce is like, that, and he's just like, Nick, what if the lighting truss was about to fall on your head? And so Bruce starts winding them up again, and there's another 4 or 5 minutes of arguing, and it ends with Steve you can hear Steve getting closer. He's like, somebody, profanities, recording this, and it ends. So what happens then is Steve's got Bruce in a bear hug. Nico grabs the tape, and he's just like, is there anything on this? And Bruce is like, no. And so he puts it on the ground, and he goes to stomp on it. Now, Nico's wearing a Chelsea boot, with a 1-inch heel and stuff. So the tape gets caught, like, wedged in between the heel and the sole of the foot, and it doesn't get broken. But Bruce, shakes free of Steve Harris, gut punches Nico, grabs the tape, and bolts off down to catering. Nico's there, winded, like, getting his breath back, and Steve's just like, Nick, don't do it. But, Nico tears down after Bruce. He's like, Steve, nobody does that in a band I've ever been in. I'm going to kick his head in. And then Nico's charging down to Bruce. He's like, Nick, I'm sorry, stop. Nico stops. He's like, what do you mean you're sorry? It's like, this tape, I forgot. I had lyrics to a song called Powerslave on it. And Nico's just like, what? Bloody hell. And, after they're recording Powerslave later on in, I believe it was Nassau, the Bahamas. Anyway, they're just like, hey, Bruce was like, hey, do you remember that argument we had on the World Peace Tour? And he's like, oh, well, of course we remember it. You started winding us up. We were at it for 20 minutes already. And then he's like, you still got that tape? So, yeah, of course I got it. It's a song called Powerslave. We're writing a song called Powerslave. Of course I've got the lyrics to Powerslave here. And so they put the tape on, and, full overhead speakers, in the recording studio. The crew, the band, everything, they're all on the floor pissing themselves laughing. And, we got to let our fans hear this. And so this argument was then put on the B-side. And, as I was saying, I did my best to live up to Nico's storytelling, but honestly, he's on another level. The first 10, 15 times I watched this video of him, I was pissing myself laughing. He's an amazing storyteller, but that is the abridged version of what happened before, during, and after the Mission from Harry argument.
That was the abridged PG version. Nico never said the word mess up. He never once said the word mess up. And that's all I'm going to say. There's one moment I want to highlight in the Mission from Mary track, which is the moment where you really know Bruce is trying to stir the pot. And that's when Nico says, I messed up my solo. And Bruce says, well, it's not like anybody noticed. And you just know
there's another point where he says,
like,
if somebody wants... There's another point where he says, if somebody wants to get a message to me, I'm not going to give him bollocking, but he's like, it's different for you. You're the singer. And, Nico's right there. Bruce is the singer. It's easier to get a message to him, sort of thing.
As kids, we had no idea what Mission from Airy was. Like, it was completely baffling. It wasn't until later that I learned the actual story. I just thought it was them goofing around. But anyway, that's all the B-sides for Powerslave, which takes us to the tour. And this is where Harrison gets to do his little thing. He is going to tell us all the details about the World Slavery Tour. Go ahead, all Harrison.
Right. The World Slavery Tour, the longest tour they've done to date. I think both in dates and in days on the road, because it was like 330 days on the road, almost a full year, and it was 189 dates. There were a few more scheduled, but some of them got cancelled. They were all over the US. I believe at the start of the tour, they went to the US, then they went elsewhere, and then they came back to the US to do the South in 1985. They had 3 weeks in Canada. Rod says, they loved Canada. Every American tour would have a Canadian dates on it. They really liked Canada, the band. They did 7 shows in Australia, but they opened the tour behind the Iron Curtain, and they were notable for being the first Western band to bring a full stage show behind the Iron Curtain. I think they say that the Scorpions had been there first, but it was just them and some marshals. Iron Maiden brought the full Egypt stage set, and what a stage set that was. The big Mummy Eddie down the back that would come out during Iron Maiden. The walk-on Eddie that would go crazy during, I can't remember what song he came on during. And you had the full Egyptian architecture all around the floor as well. Amazing stage set. One of their most enduring and iconic stage set. It's the one whenever I'm building something out of Lego, it's always like, of course, the Powerslave set. It's so recognizable. But during this Iron Curtain party, this was the time that they played at that Polish wedding. They did Smoke on the Water, a few other songs. They're all crammed into this little corner booth there, playing their Smoke on the Water and other stuff. Bruce ends it with a little heavy metal scream. And it was during these Iron Curtain dates as well, because they filmed their time behind the Iron Curtain for a documentary called Behind the Iron Curtain. And this documentary has one iconic and very ironic bit, considering what would happen in an album's time, where Bruce says, "Oh, no, you can't play heavy metal on the synthesizer." And you know what happened in 1986. All right, so some notable events, notable dates during the World Slavery Tour, because there are a few. So at the St. Louis show, Big Eddie, the one behind the stage, his foam torso got stolen. Just this massive trunk of foam stolen. They don't know how, they don't know who, they don't know. Were there two guys running down the street with a massive foam torso under their arm? It was the torso too, not the head or anything. So the next few dates after that, the seams just sort of layered up bath towels to sort of give the impression that there's still a torso there. And speaking of this Big Eddie, at the first dates, obviously they didn't have the height quite right, and so Nico was getting bashed in the head by the arms. His cymbals were getting knocked flying and stuff when it came out. He's just like, Jesus Christ, get this fixed, sort of thing. Further on in America, the band did 7 sold-out shows in a row at Radio City Music Hall, which is just crazy to think of. But Bruce began to feel a bit unwell during these shows, and this is a bit of a sign of things that would come a bit later towards the end of the tour. But Bruce had to spend most of the third show sitting on the drum riser and doing the show from there. He couldn't really do anymore. Sacramento, it was so hot that during that lull point with the narration in Rime of the Ancient Mariner, Nico turned, legged it, and jumped in a pool behind where they were playing, and he's just there under the water hearing like boom, boom, boom. And so it's like boom, 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 boom. He's like, shit, and he has to run back to the drums. And he of course, he's dripping there, so the drum tech and everyone's there with towels, because his foot is slipping on the pedals and everything. But it was so hot there. Apparently Steve's scratch plate and strings were like almost burning him as he was trying to play it. And lastly, sort of like the last notable event of this tour, apart from the dates that they filmed the live album on that we'll touch on next episode, Rock in Rio, where they played to, they think it's up to 300,000 people. They climbed to the top of the lighting rig, they look out, they couldn't see the end of the people. This was before attendance caps at these sort of events, so it was as many people showed up, and I believe this is the biggest crowd they'd ever played to. They were second on the bill to only Queen. Queen's famous Rock in Rio set is the stuff of legends, but Maiden reckons they gave them a good run for their money as the opening, not the opening band, but as in the band right before Queen. So the set list for the World Slavery Tour. Now, this is an interesting one regarding album representation, because they started the tour with 6 songs from Powerslave, but by the end of 1985, or actually by the start of 1985, they were down to 4 songs. So the only songs that by the end of the tour, and in that second leg of the tour that got regular play, were Powerslave, Rime of the Ancient Mariner, Aces High, and 2 Minutes to Midnight, which makes it one of the most underrepresented Iron Maiden albums on the live circuit, which is really odd considering it's such a monumental album in discography. Back in the Village got played at the first 2 dates behind the Iron Curtain, but was dropped after that, which is a shame because I love the song. So it was down to 5 songs from the album in 1984. And at the end of 1984, Lost for Words, Big Horror was dropped. And I think it's really cool that they played the instrumental, but it did get dropped for the 85 leg of the tour. Most of the other songs was a selection of some of the best stuff from their previous 4 albums. But some rare songs that got played only a few times include Phantom of the Opera, Children of the Damned, Die With Your Boots On, Wrathchild, and Murders in the Rue Morgue. Now, you'll probably recognize most of these songs as from side D of Live After Death. And in fact, a few of these songs were only played at those Hammersmith dates that were recorded for Live After Death. I believe 22 Acacia Avenue was also played during or maybe it was Die With Your Boots On. It was played during the 84 leg and dropped for 85. But, right, the end of the World Slavery Tour. Everyone started going a little nuts towards the end of 85. Adrian trashed a hotel room in Munich after going stir crazy. Bruce nearly quit music entirely after, and the burnout would have long-reaching consequences regarding his songwriting for the next album. But afterwards they were completely done. They took some time off, and that's where we leave it. There was a live album in the works that would come out, but we're going to touch on that next step. Well, not we're going to do that in depth next episode, not just merely touch on it.
That's right, we are. I just want to address the cover art real quick by Derek Riggs before we sum up. One of his most magnificent pieces of art. I think he tops it later on, but we'll get there at another time. And he always has his little signature, and this time it's in the little. There you go. You can actually see that. You can see his little signature there, right at the
Eddie's
entrance.
crotch.
I didn't want to say it, but that's where it is. They say the Great Pyramid once gleamed smooth like this. If you do your research and you take a look with a magnifying glass on the back here, there's tons to pick up on. But truly one of Derek's most striking pieces of art. You saw it from across the store. You couldn't miss it. You walked into the store, you scanned the aisles. That jumps out. It's so good. I'm not going to say peak Derek Riggs, but certainly it's up there. Bicyclegs, do you have anything you want to add about that?
Yeah, no, I mean, it'd be a top 3 or 4 Iron Maiden album cover for me. I think it's just absolutely wonderful. But, this is one of my favorite Iron Maiden albums, and the ones that are my favorites also tend to have some of the best artwork for me. So,
Harrison, anything you want to add?
I guess as we go into giving our final rating for the album, I'm going to say that I rated about the same as Peace of Mind, 4.25 out of 5 stars. But I should also add that Peace of Mind and Powerslave are actually my least 2 favorite of the 80s albums, which just speaks to the quality of their 80s output.
All right. Well, I was going to give this 9 out of 10 stars. My only moments of lag would be maybe lost for words. And that's about it. 9 out of 10 stars for me. What about you, Bicyclegs?
Or it'd be at least a 9 out of 10 for me. When it comes to studio albums of Iron Maiden, I always say it's a toss-up for my favorite, and this is where I'm completely different from Harrison. It's a toss-up for me between Peace of Mind, Powerslave, and Seventh Son of a Seventh Son. Those are my 3 favorite Iron Maiden albums. Which one actually tops the list would depend on what day you're asking me. So I'd give this a 9 or a 9.5. Even the like so-called lesser songs like Flash of the Blade or the Duelists, I still get a lot out of those. I think in the context of the whole album, those songs work, even if you pull them out of the context, maybe not so much. But I love this album start to finish, and it was an absolute joy to have to listen to this album again a few more times to prepare for this show. So thank you for picking me for doing this show.
Well, thank you for joining us for this show. This has been fantastic. Next time, we're going to be covering Live After Death, indeed, and then things really start to change. We'll see what happens next time on 50 Years of Iron Maiden. Absolutely like and subscribe to Bicyclegs Talks Music. There's some great stuff there, especially if you like prog, as we have been praising all night. So check them out, Bicyclegs at Bicyclegs Talks Music on YouTube. Thank you so much for watching. This has been 50 Years of Iron Maiden on Grab a Stack of Rock. Take care, everyone. We'll see you next time.